It was one of the most historic elections in South Carolina politics last year, and that was the race to fill Robert Ford's vacant South Carolina Senate seat. 9 people altogether ran for the race, but ultimately, on October 1st, Marlon Kimpson won the race in a landslide. I had a chance to talk exclusively with him for the special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. Well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yes. You know, during the last stretch of that particular election, really from, late August till early September, I was actually talking with a lot of prominent Charleston and South Carolina, politicians, that is, both Republican, Democrat, and Independent. And they basically said that you were going to get this job.
Well, there was a lot of momentum generated by our campaign, and as you know, we won the first primary with 44% of the votes.
That's right.
But the law is such that it requires you to have a runoff if you get less than 50% plus 1.
That's true.
So we had the runoff, and we got 70% of the vote there. We continue to engage the people. And so the runoff, even though it was a Democratic primary and the district is predominantly Democratic, we, for the general, we still engaged. We did everything that we did for the first 2 elections,
Sure.
and that's taking our message to the people. And of course, we won the general election by almost 80% of the vote. So I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity to look forward to rolling up my sleeves to serve.
And let's go back to October 2nd, that is, because even before then, when I talked to you the first time, you told me that your next chapter was to win your particular race. Mm-hmm. You won that race. Mm-hmm. So tell me, on that night, what was going to your mind?
Well, it was the 1st, October 1st was the election. But when I woke up the 2nd, if that's your question, it was I felt a very good feeling. It was relief that the election was over, but also I'm driven. I'm a hard worker, and I'm very driven to succeed.
Sure.
And so I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility to deliver to the needs of the district. And
Sure.
so it wasn't very long before we started to plan to engage again, with this time the focus of legislating.
Of course.
And so I felt good, but we also knew that it was time for the real work to be done.
Right. And let's go back to campaigning for a moment, because as I mentioned in the intro, at least 9 people altogether ran in that particular race from June up until October. And you had some very heavyweights, Margaret Rush and Maurice Washington. It seemed like it was tough. Was it tough for you?
It was. Politics, this is my first election. Many of those you mentioned had some previous experience. But it's very tough. It's challenging. It's stressful on your family. Fortunately, we had a message that resonated with the voters. And I will say that most of the candidates, really all with the exception of one, ended up endorsing me as I made it to the runoff. And so I was working with Margaret Rush, and she was and still is a very influential advisor. Okay. I was working with Emmanuel Ferguson. He from time to time calls me now and gives me some advice. Herbert Fielding.
Oh, yes.
And all of the others. Bob Thompson stops by the house. And so, listen, the bottom line is politics isn't personal.
Yes.
And you can't take it that way. You can't hold a grudge. These are people who have been very, very influential in the community. They got a lot of votes, and it's incumbent upon me to engage their ideas. Most recently, I reached out to Senator Robert Ford to get some of his advice on some things that he would offer based on his experience. So you can't get caught up in the personalities. We got to do the work of the people.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, have you been in contact with him, because his views with politics differ from yours.
Yeah. Well, I think our views don't that much different. His means may different somewhat in how he goes about carrying out those views. But we are both, we want to see people in the district achieve the American dream. I take him at his word that that's what he wants to do, and when you look at what, for the most part, he has done in the past, he really had a good handle serving the constituents and trying to address their concerns.
Yes.
Obviously, we don't agree on a lot of things,
Okay.
but I think that was the purpose of him serving in that position. So, you know, as I travel around the district, people have great admiration for Senator Ford, and he was my predecessor. So, as I prepare to go to Columbia next week, it was important that we at least talk, because I'm sure that he had some good advice and will have some good advice for me going forward.
I was interviewing now elected Mayor Linda Page here in Mount Pleasant just 2 days before Thanksgiving last year, and I asked her after the election, does she still feel like Linda Page? And she said yes. And I was reading a quote that you said actually wrote a letter to your supporters basically saying this, and this is very intriguing. You basically said this: in the coming days, I will be proud to be sworn in as your new senator, but this is not my seat, this is our seat. I'm wondering, do you still feel like Marlon Kimpson?
Yes, I still feel now. What has changed is I have entered into public service.
Yeah.
I've never been in public service before, other than the commitment to my local community, but that was just voluntary. I have the responsibility of representing the people. So that's who I am. I'm compassionate, and I do believe that government should work with people, but my life has changed because I actually have an official title, official responsibilities, and when a constituent calls, I have to return their call.
Right.
Before now, it was all voluntary, and it wasn't as large of a time commitment. And so the life does change, but I look forward to the challenge. This is what I signed up for, and I've already hit the ground running.
And speaking of which, you really didn't have a honeymoon period after being elected. You went straight to work. You held your first town hall meeting at North Charleston City Hall. Tell me why a town hall meeting?
Well, because, you know, District 42 has over 100,000 people that reside in it.
Sure.
And, you know, quite frankly, I can't meet with everybody who requests a meeting. And so one of the most efficient ways to do that is to go to a public place where everybody who wants to talk to me and share their interest can come. And so we had a town hall meeting, I think within the first month of me being elected, to engage the people in a dialogue on what they want to see their senator do. Now, I started out that meeting by going to the state constitution and sort of defining what a state senator does.
That's right.
And primarily, my job is to be a lawmaker. And the purpose of that position is to go to Columbia and write bills with the hope of getting those bills passed that will inure to the benefit of the citizens of South Carolina and District 42. And so that's what we've done. You'll probably get to this later, but we pre-filed 3 bills.
That's right.
And I believe those bills are somewhat reflective of some of the ideas that I heard in my engagement in the town hall meetings of such.
And you talk about the working family. Tell me, what's your agenda for them?
Well, I think by 2020, over 65% of the jobs will require some level of post-secondary education.
Sure.
Quite frankly, you're going to have to be skilled.
Absolutely.
And really, when you talk about working families, people have to feel like they can earn a living wage that will pay the bills, and you can have enough for retirement security and to provide a certain level of education to your family.
Sure.
As well as opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have but for having a job.
Yes, indeed.
And so I think one of the focuses that we have to keep in mind is that we have to make sure that the public education system is strong, because with the requirement of post-secondary, meaning education after high school, technical training, or college, you're going to have to complete high school.
Yes.
the days of just being able to muscle to earn a paycheck are almost gone.
Right.
And so this thing is about making sure people get good skills so that they can compete effectively for the jobs that will be coming online.
Let's talk about Obamacare. It has been really disastrous for some people. On the state level, what are you trying to do to get that message out and to ultimately give people the health care that they need?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Obamacare is the law of the land now. The only portion that's not the law of the land is the medical carve-out, Medicaid carve-out position, which the state of South Carolina rejected.
Sure.
So people now are registering for health care. We didn't have a health care system for all before this. President Obama campaigned on health care for all. He won by over 5 million votes. It was appealed by many as unconstitutional. The Supreme Court decided that it was constitutional, and so now we have the federal law of the land. There's a bill right now in the Senate to nullify. Well, those terms, nullify Obamacare, those terms are scary to me. Anytime the state talks about nullifying a federal law, we're not in a position to pick and choose what federal laws. Now, the issue is, will the state pass a bill that will allow us to accept the federal funds that the federal government wants to send to give health care to over 300,000 people? I think that's a worthy legislation to pass. I think that, if you look at how it's structured, we will get almost, I believe it's $11 billion. If you look at how much the federal government is willing to commit to South Carolina till 2020. Okay. And our portion of that is, after 2020, only paying 10% of the cost. Okay. Well, to me, I'm not a mathematician, but if somebody's going to give me $1 and I only have to give them back 10 cents, then that's a good proposition. And the objective is to provide health care for those who don't have it. Okay. So, I think Obamacare, the ACA is going to effect, but the issue is the Medicaid expansion. And I think a Medicaid expansion would be a good thing for South Carolina.
And I asked you this earlier in your office, but let's talk about family. Your wife and daughter, how are they doing?
Oh, they're doing great. Little Marley is 7 months old on Saturday.
Awesome.
And she is crawling.
That's good.
She's very, she likes taking pictures.
Yes.
And so I've got a lot of iPhone pictures of her.
Instagram.
She hadn't started talking yet, but and my wife Kimberlyn, we attended a function last night, so she's adjusting to the role as being an elected official's wife, but she's very supportive. And so this will be, different for us. I traveled with my job, but starting next Tuesday, I'll be in Columbia 3 days a week.
Wow.
And so it's going to be challenging, but this is what we're called to do, and we want to serve the constituents of District 42 to the best of our ability. Yes. So there's a lot of hard work involved.
Yes.
No doubt about that, and we're going to work hard, as I promised the people.
And so tell me this, what is your plan to juggle your job here as a lawyer and a politician?
I've discussed this with my law firm, and so we are going to, much of the work I do can be really done by internet these days. Yeah. And so, after I leave the Senate, I'll have to continue to do my work at the law firm. And so I'll be up early and spend late nights. But I think it's important that politicians have real world experiences, and I think that's what made me a little different in some respects to some of the challengers and also my predecessor. I do have a job, and the way that the Senate is set up is part-time. So we we're in legislation. We're in the legislative year from January to the end of May.
Right, that's right.
And then you come back home. And so I'm fortunate to have an employer who understands how important this is to the state of South Carolina and to Charleston County.
Yeah, and speaking of planning, let's talk about your next chapter again. You are a politician, you are a lawyer, you're a husband, and also you're a father. But what's the next step for you?
Well, I think that's about all I can handle right now. I want to do a good job at being a good, effective legislator. And you know, it's going to require, there's a learning curve, and so I'm reading, I'm researching, I'm doing, like I mentioned, I pre-filed some bills, so I've drafted those bills.
Sure.
But I'm going to Columbia to fight for those values that I deem important, education, health care, and giving the average citizen, the worker, an opportunity to earn a good living. And so we're going to work hard, and you know, I wouldn't want the people to think any less of me now that I'm in this position than they did before. And so we got a lot of things to do, and we're going to have to be very organized, but I hope that people will have some patience with me as I get up this learning curve.
Well, Senator Marlon Kimpson, it was so great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, sir.